Imagine being friends with someone for 25 years. You would never think that that person would hurt you, let alone try to murder you. Well, today's case is just that. Rachel and Janie had been friends for more than 2 decades, moving in with each other in 1995 when Rachel was 22 and Janie was 26. Rachel had just gone through a divorce and moved back into her parents' home when she started to hang out with Janie. Meanwhile, Janie was living in an apartment that had been broken into and said she did not want to live alone. The two women's circumstances seemed to intertwine perfectly, so they decided to move in together. At first, Rachel said she felt safe living with her friend and roommate. However, things began to turn sour when Rachel started making new friends and dating, and Janie began displaying controlling and jealous behavior. Janie's behavior began to worsen several years later, in 2010, when Rachel herniated a disc and was no longer able to work. She discovered she was pregnant at the same time, which increased Janie's controlling grip over her. Rachel began to feel like for the first time in their friendship, Janie had 100% control over her because she didn't have a job, was pregnant, and had a back injury. Rachel gave birth to her son, Ryder, in 2010. Around the same time, Rachel decided to take out a life insurance policy on herself and her roommate, with the women being each other's beneficiaries. Janie was also listed as the legal custodian of Ryder in Rachel's will. Friends described Janie as becoming a second mother to help care for Ryder. When Rachel herniated a disc again in 2015, and doctors told her she would need surgery to prevent becoming permanently disabled, Janie took Ryder under her wing, enrolling herself and the child into a program that saw her paid for looking after Ryder, which became a significant part of Rachel's income. But Rachel told a different story. She said Janie's alleged obsession with Ryder led her to abuse her capacity as the mother and son's caretaker. She alleged Janie let people at Ryder's school believe she was his parent. This led to fights between the two best friends, and on June 20th, 2018, Rachel received a letter announcing that Janie was suing her for custody of Ryder. Rachel called the authorities, who informed her that Janie had filed a protective order. Ryder was returned to Rachel's custody 10 days later after a Child Protective Services investigation. Following the custody incident, the women moved back in together. But it didn't end there. As Rachel recovered from her neck surgery, Janie helped to care for her, including tending to her post-surgery incisions. Rachel would complain about Janie rubbing her neck, ultimately resulting in more pain. A suspicious MRSA infection was later discovered on the wound. MRSA is a type of staph bacteria that can be resistant to several antibiotics, and Rachel ended up in the hospital. Rachel then had 2 more mysterious health scares. The first occurring in June 2019, when Rachel had 2 separate episodes of dangerous blood sugar levels which required her to be hospitalized, though she was not diabetic and did not take insulin. Rachel remembered a conversation between her and Janie that took place while they were watching a true crime documentary, in which Janie told her that the best way to kill someone and get away with it would be to inject the victim with insulin. This being a major red flag, Rachel paid it no mind because her best friend of 25 years would never do this to her. This is where Rachel had been wrong. Rachel had another surgery in October 2019 and developed 3 golf ball-sized infections on the wound. One of the infections was tested and was determined to contain E. coli, a type of bacteria. At the time, Rachel's surgeon told investigators that the E. coli infection did not come as a result of surgery and must have been injected. Meanwhile, the FBI was investigating someone attempting to purchase a lethal bacteria known as Versa on the dark web, a trail that eventually led them straight to Janie. From October to December 2019, Janie communicated with the dark web vendor and told them that she was a biology teacher who needed Versa cultures for a school science experiment. When the vendor said Versa could be obtained through more legitimate sources for scientific research, Janie offered to pay for overnight shipping to receive the cultures faster and paid for $300 worth of the bacteria in Bitcoin. Janie also used the dark web to purchase sedatives such as ketamine, Xanax, and insulin injector pens. Janie was eventually caught when investigators intercepted Janie's virus order and replaced it with a dummy package. They then staked out the UPS store where she had ordered the substance. On their second day of surveillance, they saw an individual matching Janie's description enter the store and collect the package. After tailing her to Salt Lake, they apprehended her at her place of work and questioned her about her plans for the bacteria, although she initially denied any harmful intent, claiming instead that the package contained coffee beans. She finally admitted purchasing a biological from the dark web to make beer. Authorities later found an expended insulin injector pen with Rachel's DNA on the outside of the pen at Janie's home, along with a copy of her living will that had gone missing from the safe. Janie was arrested and charged with 3 felonies.
All right, well, investigators say there's no threat to the public after a Salt Lake County woman is booked into jail and charged with possession or use of a weapon of mass destruction.
ABC4's Haley Hendricks has the latest on the arrest.
Knocking on doors in the neighborhood where 50-year-old Janie Ridd lives. Of those that were home, some knew of the accusations while others were unaware. A woman who lives near Ridd's home would not talk to us, but confirms that this house right here is where she lives. I knocked on her door, but no one answered. Ridd is accused of purchasing a biological agent online that is classified as a weapon of mass destruction. Investigators say she faces charges relating to suspicion of violating state laws and a potential federal offense.
At no point was the public in any danger from this possible biological agent. Second, at this time, investigators have absolutely no reason to believe that Ms. Ridd had any connections to terrorism whatsoever.
When investigators talked to Ridd, they say her statements were misleading and she wasn't able to prove she has a legitimate reason for having it. Reporting in Salt Lake City, Haley Hendricks, ABC4 News.
Janie pleaded guilty to attempted intentional abuse of a disabled or elder adult and attempted possession of a weapon of mass destruction on August 25, 2020. She was sentenced to between 1 to 20 years in prison.
A Salt Lake County woman could spend 20 years in prison. This after confessing she tried to poison and kill her roommate and best friend. Tonight, we are hearing from the victim after today's sentencing hearing. ABC4's Rosie Nguyen explains what they believe the motive was.
For nearly 25 years, this woman considered 51-year-old Janie Lynn Ridd her best friend. She says Ridd not only lived with her, but became her caretaker when she fell ill and helped watch her son who has autism.
We considered each other family, like we called each other our sisters.
The woman, who only wanted to be identified as Rachel, says last fall, she and Ridd began having disagreements over her will and child's parental custody. Shortly after, doctors discovered that someone was injecting her with bacteria and insulin, but it wasn't enough to kill her. Prosecutors say Ridd turned to the dark web to purchase Versa, only to find out the person who was selling it to her was actually an undercover FBI agent.
When I was reading my statement, I could see her, and she didn't care. Strangers seem to care more than she does. That was really painful for me.
Ridd pled guilty to the charges. In a statement, Ridd's defense attorney wrote in part, quote, "Despite a sentencing matrix of probation, she agreed to go to prison, and we have put our faith in the Board of Pardons to consider a fair sentence." Monday morning, a judge sentenced Ridd to a total of 1 to 20 years in prison. Rachel and her attorneys say they are satisfied with the outcome and feel that justice was served.
I am on the road to recovery as far as day-to-day living. I think the psychological and emotional is probably going to be what lasts the longest.
Reporting in Salt Lake County, Rosie Nguyen, ABC4 News.
Janie, now 55, was granted parole and released in January 2022 after serving 25 months in prison. This case was a roller coaster for sure. Janie's attempts on Rachel's life by using bacteria is a different type of malice. My thoughts are with Rachel and her son, Ryder. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know below in the comment section. I'm Dark Raven, and I'll be back next time with more true crime.